ICE sets new rules for immigration detentions and deportations. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas released the new civil immigration law enforcement guidelines this past Thursday, which are intended to better focus the department's resources on the apprehension and removal of undocumented immigrants who pose a threat for national security, public safety, and border security, and ensure that a case-by-case assessment will be made of whether or not an undocumented immigrant poses a threat before assessing whether or not their detention is appropriate. Welcome to Radio Labio's English program, where I share the most interesting notes of the day that you may not have had time to catch up on. I'm Juan Andres. I podcast in English and Spanish to ensure that all Latinos can have access to our programs regardless of what language they speak. Thank you for listening. The Biden administration announced new rules that require immigration authorities to only go after migrants who recently crossed into the country without permission or who are deemed to pose a threat to public safety. And that is not what President Donald Trump was doing. He was removing people that have been here for decades and didn't impose a threat and were needed in their jobs. He didn't care. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, will prioritize the arrest and deportation of certain undocumented immigrants, including those suspected of terrorism, individuals with serious criminal conduct, or who have recently crossed the border illegally. For the first time, our guidelines in the pursuit of public safety will require an evaluation of the individual and will take into account the totality of the facts and circumstances. National Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said recently, this past Thursday, in a statement. If you understand that statement, it means exactly what it says. For the first time, our guidelines, those are the rules and regulations by which Border Patrol has to abide by, has to take into consideration the pursuit of public safety, and it will require an evaluation of the individual and will take into account the totality of the facts and circumstances. How long he's been here, is he a good citizen, a good resident, even though he's undocumented, but he lives here, so he's a resident. Not a legal resident, but a resident. In exercising this discretion, we're guided by the knowledge that there are people in our country who have been here for generations and have contributed to the well-being of our country, including those who have been on the front lines of the battle against COVID, lead congregations of faith, and teach our children. As we strive to provide them with a path to status, we will not work in conflict by spending resources seeking to eliminate those who do not pose a threat and in fact strengthen our nation, Mayorkas stressed in his statement. Enforcement priorities for detention and removal will focus on non-citizens who are a threat to national security, public safety, and border security. The new guidelines are a complete break from the previously established procedure. Detentions of undocumented immigrants occurred frequently within the United States and not just at the border, as in the case of the ICE raids on workplaces. You have to remember that these people are here because they're needed. Companies want to hire them because Americans don't want to do the work or accept the pay that these companies can afford to pay to be able to compete in the world market, especially if they're selling their articles abroad and competing against nations that offer very reasonable prices because of low wages. To be competitive, we have to have a legal workforce that's affordable. The new rules require an assessment of the individual and the totality of the facts and circumstances surrounding the individual to ensure that resources are more effectively focused. Is he married? Does he have kids? Are the kids going to school? Is he a law-abiding citizen? Does he have any outstanding warrants? All these things have to be taken into consideration. It is also recognized that the majority of the more than 11 million undocumented or non-citizens of the United States have been contributing members of our communities across the country for years. Some of them are preachers. Some of them work in nonprofit to help people in need. The fact that an individual is a removable non-citizen will not in itself be the basis for an enforcement action against them. That's a major change and very positive for Latinos. The fact that an individual is a removable non-citizen, he doesn't have any documents, he's not supposed to be here, but he's been here for a long time. It will not in itself be the basis for an enforcement action against them. And that's the major change. In other words, the Trump idea of getting everybody out of here, regardless of whether they've contributed and whether they're good people, is gone. An undocumented immigrant is considered a threat to border security if he is arrested at the border or port of entry attempting to enter the United States illegally, or if he is arrested within the country after entering the United States illegally after November of the year 2020, which is the last election when Trump lost and Biden won. The new guide will take effect in 60 days on November the 29th of 2021. So, I'm doing this program in early part of November, so it's only a matter of 2.5 to 3 weeks before this will become ironclad, and ICE will only be able to follow these guide rules. The new guide will take effect in 60 days on November the 29th. I am grateful to the ICE staff for their candor in our discussions about their critical law enforcement mission. Mayorkas continued, the new guidelines will enable our department to more effectively fulfill our mission of law enforcement while promoting the well-being of our country by recognizing the invaluable contributions of millions of people who are part of the fabric of our communities. The guidelines will help us exercise our procedural discretion to achieve justice. Be just, which is not what was the case with Trump. He wanted to be legal, and legal is whatever he ordered to be the law of the country through the DOJ or whatever sneaky things he was doing with his departments where he was supposed to be having an arm's length relationship with. In other words, he was already running the country as a semi-autocracy. And the only thing that kept him in line was the fear of not being elected again. And thank goodness he didn't get reelected again, or this place would be a mess. Protect civil rights is key. The new immigration law enforcement guidelines require the protection of civil rights and liberties, which is what this country's all about. The race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity, national origin, political associations, or exercise of First Amendment rights of a non-citizen cannot be factors in deciding to take enforcement action. Because these people are protesting, it's not good enough to be used to get them out of the country. No longer. That's gone. For the first time, these rights are explicitly protected against the use of immigration law enforcement as a retaliatory tool to assert legal rights by a non-citizen. In other words, the Border Patrol and ICE were using it to threaten people to do what they wanted them to do. Sign this document or I'm going to throw you in jail where you're going to be raped by males. And that was going on. The guidelines make clear that the Immigration Enforcement Authority will not be used as an instrument by unscrupulous employers seeking to exploit the immigration status of their employees. And that is the major, major change, that Trump would look the other way, even though these people were being treated unjustly. The laws were being broken. He didn't care because they didn't have any rights. So what? Abuse them, use them, and then when I get my hands on them, I'll throw them out. Even though I'm going to hurt the economy of the country because they won't have the employees at the wages that they need to pay to be able to compete on the world market. Very positive things are happening. Look, let me explain something to you. I'm an American. I'm immigrated here. I wasn't born in this country. I understand clearly that we can't have open borders and have everybody coming in whenever they decide they have a problem in their own country. We would lose sight of what and how we're going and what we want to accomplish in this country. I understand that. But there's also needs, economic needs. We need to maintain the position of being the #1 economy in the world. We can't just consume everything that we manufacture. We have to export. We need other people, not just 350 million people, to buy the products that we produce. We need access to the billions around the world to buy our products, and to do so, we're competing against every other country in the world. If we lose that market, it will take away our position as #1, the #1 economy in the world, in my opinion. So this is more than just undocumented aliens, and we don't like Mexicans, and we don't like brown people, and all these silly things that they're talking about. I'm looking at it as what's best for my country. Even though I wasn't born here, I love this country. And I also see the great lifestyle you have here. I've lived and I was born abroad. I know the difference. I've lived the difference, and I appreciate what I have. And I also know that if we lose that status of being #1, our standard of living is going to decrease. It's going to drop. And I don't think that's a good idea. We have a beautiful standard of living. Those that were born here take it for granted and go, oh, well, this'll be around whenever we want it. All we have to do is yell and scream and say that we don't like something and attack it. No. Democracies are fragile. Economies are fragile. The founding fathers, by accident, running away from totalitarianism in England, created something very special. They had no idea it was going to get to the point that they were going to be the #1 country in the world. They didn't have a clue. But they put enough behind it that as it grew, as the country grew, and it adjusted, and there were amendments to the Constitution, and the whole idea of the basis of what they created back then all that mix, all that soup, that melting pot of ideas created the most powerful economic power in the world with the largest military and a highly respected country. I don't want to lose that. And I don't want to take the risk of changing to a totalitarian or an authoritative form of government that the Republicans are now touting and that Trump wants to, and guarantees that if he gets elected again, he's going to make sure that he changes our system of government. Why would I want to do that when what we have has created and allowed us to be number one in the world? Why would I want to fix what's damaged? You don't fix what's working. Duh. I mean, that's rule number one in business and everything in life. You don't fix something that's working for you. You fix what's not working for you. We have a fabulous country. Now, getting back to this, these guidelines make clear that unscrupulous employers can no longer take advantage of undocumented aliens, paying them below, having them work extra hours, where some of them are making half of what they're supposed to be making, half of the minimum wage, if they're lucky, being abused physically. In some cases, I've heard that they've even turned around and been abused sexually because they have children and they have to feed them. And they're afraid to report to the authorities because they're going to get deported. Well, taking away that threat of deportation allows these people to come out and expose these unscrupulous employers and gives them an opportunity to be hired by the companies that really need them, not the ones that are abusing and using them. I think that this is a fabulous step that has to be followed, obviously, with changes, legal changes to our system of immigration. So we don't have to worry about all these changes that are going to happen every time a president is elected in office, but it becomes the law of the land. And every president has to accept it. I'm Juan Andres. You can find us on more than 60 sites on the internet where you can listen to our podcast. Just ask Google Radio Labio and bingo will show up. On my behalf, as well as my colleague Yvonne Encinas, and our manager and fellow on-air personality Francisco Maldonado, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.